The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, casting long shadows across the marble floors as 8-year-old Emma sat at the breakfast table, her small legs swinging back and forth beneath her chair. She pushed her scrambled eggs around her plate with a silver fork, her mind elsewhere as she listened to the adults talking in hushed tones near the kitchen doorway. Marcus Blackwood, the man she had come to know as her father figure over the past 3 years, stood with his back to her, his broad shoulders tense as he spoke quietly into his phone. His dark hair was perfectly styled as always, and his expensive suit hung flawlessly on his tall frame. Even at 8 years old, Emma understood that Marcus was important, that he had more money than most people could ever dream of, and that he had taken care of her and her mother Sarah when they had nowhere else to go. Sarah Bennett had been working as a housekeeper at one of Marcus's hotels when they first met. She was a single mother struggling to make ends meet, working multiple jobs just to keep a small apartment and put food on the table for Emma. Marcus had noticed Sarah's dedication and work ethic, but more than that, he had been drawn to her genuine kindness and the way she never asked for anything beyond what she had earned. When Sarah's landlord had suddenly raised the rent beyond what she could afford, Marcus had offered them a place to stay in his guest house, claiming he needed someone to help manage his household staff. That arrangement had slowly evolved into something more. Sarah and Marcus had fallen in love, though they had been careful to keep their relationship private, especially around Emma. Marcus had never been married and had no children of his own, but he had embraced the role of father figure to Emma with surprising natural ease. He read her bedtime stories, helped with homework, and made sure she had everything she could ever want or need. Now, as Emma sat at the breakfast table in the main house where they had been living for the past 6 months since Marcus and Sarah had gotten engaged, she could sense that something was different. There was a tension in the air that she couldn't quite understand, but it made her stomach feel funny in a way that had nothing to do with the breakfast she was barely eating. Sarah entered the dining room carrying a fresh pot of coffee, her blonde hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and her blue eyes bright with excitement. She wore a simple but elegant dress that Marcus had bought for her, and the engagement ring on her finger caught the morning light as she moved. Emma loved seeing her mother happy like this, so different from the tired, worried woman she had been before Marcus came into their lives. "Emma, sweetheart, finish your breakfast," Sarah said gently, setting the coffee pot on the sideboard. "We have a busy day ahead of us. Your Aunt Rebecca is coming to visit this afternoon, and I want everything to be perfect." Emma looked up from her plate, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Aunt Rebecca?" "Yes, honey. I told you about her, remember? My sister from back east. She's been traveling and finally has time to come meet Marcus and see our new home." Sarah's voice carried a note of nervous excitement that Emma had never heard before. Marcus ended his phone call and turned toward them, his expression serious but softening when he looked at Emma. He was 42 years old and had built his fortune through a combination of smart investments, hard work, and an uncanny ability to read people. His success in business came partly from his attention to detail and his instinct for when something didn't feel right. Right now, something about this impending visit was bothering him, though he couldn't put his finger on exactly what. "Tell me more about your sister," Marcus said to Sarah as he took his seat at the head of the table. "I realized last night that in all our conversations about your family, you've mentioned her, but never really talked about her in detail." Sarah's smile flickered for just a moment before returning full force. "Oh, you know how it is with siblings. Rebecca and I have always been different. She's the adventurous one, always traveling, never settling down in one place for too long. We haven't seen each other in years, but family is family, right?" Emma watched this exchange with the keen observation skills that children often possess, but adults frequently underestimate. Something about the way her mother's hands fidgeted with her napkin, the way her voice got slightly higher when she talked about Aunt Rebecca, made Emma feel uneasy. She had never heard her mother mention this sister before yesterday, and Emma had a very good memory for family stories. Marcus nodded slowly, but Emma could see that he was thinking hard about something. "What did you say her last name was again?" "Bennett, of course. Same as mine was before we got engaged." Sarah's laugh sounded forced to Emma's ears. She never married. Always said she was too busy seeing the world to settle down with one person. The rest of breakfast passed with more discussion about the preparations for Rebecca's visit. Sarah wanted to make sure the guest room was perfect, that they had all of Rebecca's favorite foods, and that the house looked its absolute best. Marcus listened and nodded, but Emma could tell he was distracted. She had learned to read his moods over the years they had lived together, and right now he had the same expression he got when he was working on a particularly complicated business deal. After breakfast, Sarah hurried off to supervise the household staff in their preparations, leaving Emma and Marcus alone in the dining room. Emma slid out of her chair and walked over to where Marcus sat, still nursing his coffee and staring out the window at the perfectly manicured grounds of his estate. "Marcus." Emma's voice was small and uncertain. He looked down at her and smiled, the serious expression melting away as it always did when she needed his attention. "What is it, sweetheart? Are you worried about Aunt Rebecca coming?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. He had always been honest with Emma, treating her with more respect and consideration than many adults showed children. "I'm not worried exactly, but I want to make sure everything goes well. Your mom seems nervous about it, and I want her to be happy." Emma nodded solemnly. "Mommy has been acting funny since she got the phone call about Aunt Rebecca coming. She keeps cleaning things that are already clean and checking the guest room over and over." This observation struck Marcus as particularly insightful. Sarah had indeed been more anxious than usual, and he had attributed it to wanting to make a good impression on her sister. But Emma's innocent comment made him wonder if there was something else going on. "Emma, has your mom ever talked to you about Aunt Rebecca before this week?" Emma shook her head slowly. "I don't think so. I know about Grandma and Grandpa Bennett, and Mommy told me stories about growing up in Pennsylvania. But I don't remember her ever talking about having a sister." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. In all their conversations about family, Sarah had mentioned her parents, who had died when Emma was very young, and various cousins and distant relatives. But now that he thought about it, she had never specifically mentioned having a sister. Yesterday was the first time the name Rebecca had come up, when Sarah had announced that her sister would be coming for a visit. Marcus prided himself on having an excellent memory for details, especially when it came to the people he cared about. He could remember Sarah telling him about her childhood, about being lonely as an only child after her parents died, about having to figure out how to raise Emma on her own with no family support. The story of having a sister who had been traveling the world didn't fit with those earlier conversations. "Emma, I want you to do something for me today," Marcus said carefully. "When Aunt Rebecca gets here, I want you to pay attention to how she and your mom act together. Sometimes you can tell a lot about people by watching how they interact." Emma nodded seriously. She liked when Marcus asked her to help with important things. It made her feel grown up and trusted. The rest of the morning passed in a flurry of activity. Sarah directed the staff in preparing an elaborate lunch, arranging flowers in the guest room, and making sure every surface in the house was spotless. Marcus tried to focus on his work, but he found himself distracted by a growing sense of unease. Finally, around 11 o'clock, he made a decision that he hoped he wouldn't regret. Marcus went to his home office and closed the door behind him. The room was his sanctuary, filled with expensive furniture, awards from various business organizations, and family photos that now included many pictures of Sarah and Emma. He sat behind his mahogany desk and opened his laptop, then picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in over a year. "Davidson Investigations, this is Tom." "Tom, it's Marcus Blackwood. I need you to run a background check for me, and I need it fast." Tom Davidson had been Marcus's go-to private investigator for years, handling everything from corporate due diligence to personal security matters. He was discreet, thorough, and fast when the situation called for it. "What do you need, Marcus?" "I need everything you can find on a Rebecca Bennett. She would be in her 30s, possibly from Pennsylvania, and she's supposed to be the sister of Sarah Bennett, my fiancée. I need to know if this person exists and if she's really related to Sarah." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "This sounds personal. Everything okay?" Marcus hesitated. He felt guilty for investigating Sarah's family behind her back, but his instincts were screaming that something was wrong. "I hope so. How quickly can you get me information?" "Give me 2 hours. I'll call you back." Marcus hung up the phone and sat back in his leather chair, staring at the ceiling. He hoped he was being paranoid, that his business instincts were simply overreacting to what was probably a perfectly normal family visit. But he hadn't gotten where he was by ignoring his gut feelings, and right now his gut was telling him that Rebecca Bennett was not who she claimed to be. Meanwhile, Emma was in the living room with Sarah, helping to arrange magazines on the coffee table. Sarah was chattering nervously about what they would serve for lunch, what they would talk about with Rebecca, and how excited she was to have her sister meet Marcus and see their new life. "Mommy," Emma said quietly, "what does Aunt Rebecca look like?" Sarah paused in her magazine arranging. "Oh, well, she looks like me, I suppose. We're sisters, after all. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes. Though she's always been more adventurous with her style than I am." Emma nodded, but something about this answer bothered her too. Her mother had always told her that she got her dark hair and brown eyes from her father, who had left when Emma was a baby. Sarah's blonde hair and blue eyes were nothing like Emma's coloring, which had always made Emma feel a little different from her mother. If Aunt Rebecca looked just like Sarah, then she would look nothing like Emma either. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a taxi pulled up the long driveway to the Blackwood mansion. Emma watched from the living room window as a woman got out of the back seat, paid the driver, and walked toward the front door carrying a small suitcase. The woman had short, dark red hair and was wearing jeans and a leather jacket that looked expensive but well-worn. She was tall and thin, with sharp features and in confident stride. Emma frowned. This woman looked nothing like her mother. Sarah rushed to the front door, smoothing her dress and checking her reflection in the hallway mirror one more time. Marcus appeared from his office, having heard the taxi arrive, and stood slightly behind Sarah as she opened the door. "Rebecca." Sarah's voice was bright and welcoming, but Emma noticed that her mother's smile looked forced. "I'm so glad you're finally here." The woman who was supposed to be Rebecca Bennett stepped into the foyer and looked around with obvious appreciation for the expensive surroundings. "Sarah, this place is incredible. You really landed yourself a good one, didn't you?" Her voice had a slight accent that Emma couldn't identify, and when she hugged Sarah, it looked awkward and brief, like two people who didn't really know each other very well. Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand. "You must be Rebecca. I'm Marcus Blackwood. Sarah has told me so much about you." Rebecca shook his hand with a firm grip and looked him directly in the eyes. "All good things, I hope. And you must be the millionaire who swept my little sister off her feet." There was something in her tone that made Emma uncomfortable, though she couldn't explain why. It wasn't exactly unfriendly, but it wasn't warm either. It was like the woman was playing a part in a movie, saying the right words, but not really meaning them. Sarah led Rebecca into the living room, where Emma was still standing by the window. "Rebecca, I want you to meet Emma, my daughter. Emma, this is your Aunt Rebecca." Rebecca looked down at Emma with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, hello there, Emma. My, you're a pretty little thing, aren't you?" Emma stared up at the woman who was supposed to be her aunt. Everything about this felt wrong. The woman didn't look anything like her mother, despite what Sarah had said about sisters looking alike. Her voice was different, her mannerisms were different, and most importantly, she looked at Emma like she was meeting her for the first time, which, Emma realized with a start, she probably was. "Hi," Emma said quietly, not moving from her spot by the window. Marcus was watching this interaction carefully, and Emma could see that he was thinking the same thing she was. This woman didn't act like someone who was meeting her niece after years of being apart. There was no warmth, no excitement, no family resemblance, and no shared memories or inside jokes that Emma would have expected between sisters. Sarah seemed to sense the awkwardness and quickly ushered everyone toward the dining room. "I've prepared a wonderful lunch for us. Rebecca, I made all your favorite foods." As they walked to the dining room, Emma noticed that Rebecca was looking around the house like she was appraising it, taking note of the expensive artwork, the crystal chandeliers, and the obvious signs of wealth everywhere. It reminded Emma of the way some of her mother's old friends had looked at their new life, with a mixture of envy and calculation. Lunch was a stilted affair. Sarah kept trying to bring up childhood memories, but Rebecca's responses were vague and noncommittal. When Sarah mentioned their parents' old house in Pennsylvania, Rebecca said she remembered it differently than Sarah described. When Sarah talked about a family vacation they had supposedly taken together, Rebecca claimed her memory was fuzzy about the details. Marcus asked Rebecca about her travels, and she launched into elaborate stories about living in Europe, working various jobs, and never staying in one place for too long. Her stories were entertaining but felt rehearsed, like she had told them many times before to different audiences. Emma ate her lunch quietly, watching and listening to everything. She noticed that Rebecca never asked about Emma's school, her friends, or her interests, which seemed strange for an aunt who was meeting her niece for the first time in years. She also noticed that Rebecca kept steering the conversation back to Marcus's business, asking questions about his investments, his properties, and his future plans. About halfway through lunch, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and saw that it was Tom Davidson calling back with the background check results. "Excuse me, I need to take this call," Marcus said, standing up from the table. "It's business-related." He walked to his office and closed the door before answering the phone. "Tom, what did you find?" "Marcus, you're not going to like this. I've searched every database I have access to, and I cannot find any record of a Rebecca Bennett who matches the description you gave me. More importantly, I pulled Sarah Bennett's family records, and according to every official document I can find, she was an only child. No siblings listed on her birth certificate, no sisters mentioned in her parents' obituaries, no school records indicating she had a sister." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "Are you absolutely certain?" "As certain as I can be. I also ran a broader search for any Rebecca Bennett in the age range you specified, and I found several, but none of them have any connection to Sarah or to Pennsylvania. Marcus, whoever this woman is, she's not Sarah's sister." Marcus thanked Tom and hung up the phone, his mind racing. If Rebecca wasn't Sarah's sister, then who was she, and what was she doing in his house? More importantly, was Sarah being deceived, or was she part of whatever scheme was unfolding? He sat in his office chair, trying to process this information. Sarah had always been honest with him about everything, from her financial struggles to her past relationships to her fears about their future together. The idea that she would lie about having a sister, or that she would bring a stranger into their home under false pretenses, seemed completely out of character. But the evidence was clear. Rebecca Bennett, as she had been presented to him, did not exist. Marcus made a decision. He would confront Sarah privately and give her a chance to explain what was happening. There had to be a reasonable explanation, some misunderstanding or family complication that would make sense of this situation. He loved Sarah and trusted her, and he wasn't going to let a background check destroy their relationship without giving her a chance to explain. He was about to leave his office when he heard Emma's voice in the hallway outside his door. She was talking quietly to herself, the way children sometimes do when they're trying to work through a problem. "That's not Mommy's sister," Emma was saying. "That's not Mommy's sister at all." Marcus opened his office door and found Emma standing in the hallway, looking troubled and confused. "Emma, what did you say?" Emma looked up at him with her serious brown eyes. "That woman in there, she's not Mommy's sister." "I know she's not." "What makes you say that, sweetheart?" Emma glanced toward the dining room to make sure they couldn't be overheard, then moved closer to Marcus. "She doesn't know anything about Mommy. When Mommy talked about their old house, the lady said it was different than what Mommy said. And she doesn't look like Mommy at all, even though Mommy said they looked the same. And she doesn't act like she knows me, even though I'm supposed to be her niece." Marcus knelt down so he was at Emma's eye level. "You're very observant, Emma. What else did you notice? She keeps asking you about money and business stuff, but she doesn't ask about me or Mommy. And when Mommy hugs her, it looks weird, like they don't really know each other." Emma paused, then added quietly, "I think she's trying to trick us." Marcus felt a surge of pride in Emma's intelligence and perception, mixed with anger at whoever was behind this deception. An 8-year-old child had seen through this scheme more quickly than he had, and he was supposed to be good at reading people. "Emma, I need you to do something very important for me. I need you to go to your room and stay there until I come get you. Can you do that?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Are you going to tell Mommy that the lady is lying?" "I'm going to figure out what's going on," Marcus promised. "But I need you to be safe while I do that." Emma hurried upstairs to her room, and Marcus took a deep breath before walking back to the dining room. He found Sarah and Rebecca finishing their lunch, with Sarah still chattering nervously about family memories that Rebecca continued to respond to vaguely. "Rebecca," Marcus said, taking his seat at the table, "I'm curious about something. Sarah mentioned that you two grew up together in Pennsylvania. What was the name of your elementary school?" Rebecca paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "Oh, that was so long ago. I'm terrible with names of places from when I was young." Sarah jumped in quickly. "We went to different schools, actually. Rebecca was in a different district." Marcus nodded slowly. "I see. And Rebecca, what was your parents' address?" "I'm thinking of having some flowers sent to their grave sites as a gesture of respect." This time Rebecca's pause was longer, and Marcus could see her mind working to come up with an answer. "They're buried in a small cemetery outside of town. I'd have to look up the exact address." Sarah was looking increasingly uncomfortable, and Marcus realized that she knew something was wrong too. The question was whether she was a victim or a participant in whatever was happening. "You know what?" Marcus said, standing up from the table. "I just remembered that I have some important business calls to make this afternoon. Rebecca, I hope you'll excuse me for a few hours. Sarah can show you around the house and get you settled in the guest room." He left the dining room and went back to his office, but instead of making business calls, he positioned himself where he could hear the conversation between Sarah and Rebecca. What he heard made his blood boil. "Jesus, Sarah, you didn't tell me he was going to ask so many questions." Rebecca's voice had lost its fake warmth and now sounded irritated and street-smart. "I didn't know he would," Sarah replied, and Marcus could hear the stress in her voice. He's usually not this suspicious about family stuff. Well, he's suspicious now. How much does he know? Nothing, I think. But Marcus is really smart about business stuff, and he has good instincts about people. If he gets suspicious enough, he might start checking up on things. Rebecca laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Let him check. By the time he figures anything out, we'll be long gone with enough money to disappear forever." Marcus felt like he had been punched in the stomach. Sarah was part of this. The woman he loved, the woman he had planned to marry, the woman he had welcomed into his home and his life, was planning to rob him. "I still don't like this," Sarah was saying. "Emma is getting suspicious too. She's a smart kid, and she's asking questions about why you don't look like me." "Kids are easy to fool," Rebecca replied dismissively. "Just keep her distracted until we can get what we came for." "What if Marcus finds out before we can get to the safe? What if he calls the police? Then we'll have to move to Plan B. But let's hope it doesn't come to that. I'd rather do this the easy way." Marcus had heard enough. He quietly picked up his phone and dialed 911, speaking in a whisper to report that there were intruders in his home who were planning to rob him. He gave his address and asked for officers to come immediately, but to approach quietly so as not to alert the suspects. Then he called Tom Davidson back. "Tom, I need you to get over here right now. Bring backup if you have any available. The situation is worse than I thought." "On my way," Tom replied without asking for details. Marcus hung up the phone and sat back in his chair, trying to process the betrayal he had just discovered. Sarah, the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman he had planned to spend the rest of his life with, had been playing a long con from the very beginning. Everything between them had been a lie designed to get close to his money. He thought about Emma upstairs in her room, and his heart broke for her. She was an innocent child caught in the middle of her mother's criminal scheme. What would happen to her when Sarah was arrested? Did she have any other family who could take care of her? Then Marcus realized something that made him feel even sicker. If Sarah had been lying about everything else, what if she had been lying about Emma too? What if Emma wasn't even her daughter? What if Emma was just another part of the con, a prop to make Sarah seem more sympathetic and trustworthy? But even as this thought crossed his mind, Marcus rejected it. He had seen Sarah with Emma over the years, had witnessed the genuine love and concern between them. Whatever else Sarah might be lying about, her love for Emma was real. Emma was her daughter, and she was just as much a victim of this situation as Marcus was. Marcus heard footsteps on the stairs and realized that Sarah and Rebecca were going up to the guest room. This was his chance to check on Emma and make sure she was safe. He quietly left his office and climbed the stairs to Emma's room. He knocked softly on her door and heard her small voice tell him to come in. Emma was sitting on her bed with a book in her lap, but she wasn't reading. She looked up at Marcus with worried eyes. "Did you figure out what's going on?" she asked. Marcus sat down on the edge of her bed, trying to figure out how to explain this situation to an 8-year-old child. "Emma, I need to tell you something very serious, and I need you to be brave, okay?" Emma nodded, setting her book aside. "The woman downstairs is not your mother's sister. She's a stranger who came here to steal things from us. And I'm very sorry to have to tell you this, but your mother has been helping her." Emma's face went pale, but she didn't cry or get hysterical. Instead, she asked quietly, "Is Mommy going to go to jail?" Marcus felt his heart break for this little girl who was handling this terrible news with more maturity than many adults would show. "I don't know, sweetheart. The police are coming, and they'll figure out what happens next." "What's going to happen to me?" Emma's voice was very small. Marcus reached out and took her hand. "I don't know that either, but I promise you that I will make sure you're taken care of, no matter what happens. You're not alone in this, okay?" Emma nodded and squeezed his hand. "I knew something was wrong. I tried to tell you. You did tell me, and you were absolutely right. You're a very smart girl, Emma, and I'm proud of you for trusting your instincts." They sat together quietly for a few minutes, listening to the sounds of Sarah and Rebecca moving around in the guest room down the hall. Marcus was trying to figure out what their plan might be and how to keep Emma safe until the police arrived. Then they heard Sarah's voice calling from downstairs. Marcus? Emma? Where is everyone? Marcus squeezed Emma's hand. I need you to stay in your room no matter what happens, okay? Lock the door behind me and don't open it for anyone except me or a police officer. Emma nodded solemnly. Be careful, Marcus. Marcus left Emma's room and heard her lock the door behind him. He walked downstairs to find Sarah and Rebecca waiting in the living room. Rebecca had changed out of her jeans and leather jacket into a more conservative dress, and she was carrying a small purse that seemed heavier than it should be. There you are, Sarah said with a bright smile that now looked completely fake to Marcus. Rebecca was hoping you could show her your art collection. She's always been interested in fine art. Marcus looked at Rebecca, who was studying the expensive paintings on his walls with obvious interest. Of course. Though I have to ask, Rebecca, what's your background in art? Are you a collector yourself? Rebecca turned to him with that same fake smile. Oh, I'm just an enthusiast. I've picked up a few pieces in my travels. Nothing as impressive as what you have here. I see. And where exactly have you been traveling recently? All over Europe, mostly. France, Italy, Spain. You know how it is when you're young and free. Marcus nodded. That sounds wonderful. I'm curious, though, what's your last name again? Sarah said Bennett, but I want to make sure I have it right for the guest registry. For just a moment, Rebecca's composure slipped, and Marcus saw a flash of panic in her eyes. Bennett, of course. Same as Sarah's maiden name. Right, of course. Silly of me to forget. Marcus smiled pleasantly. Would you like to see my home office? I have some interesting pieces in there as well. Rebecca's eyes lit up with genuine interest. I'd love to. As Marcus led them toward his office, he caught sight of police cars pulling quietly up his driveway. The officers were being discreet as he had requested, parking out of sight of the house's main windows. In his office, Marcus gestured toward a painting on the wall behind his desk. This is an original Monet. It's worth about $2 million. Rebecca moved closer to examine the painting, and Marcus could see her mind working, probably calculating how to steal it. It's beautiful, she said. You must have very good security to protect pieces like this. Oh yes, the best money can buy. Motion sensors, cameras, a state-of-the-art safe for the smaller valuable items. Marcus was watching Rebecca's face as he spoke, and he could see her filing away every piece of information. Sarah was standing in the doorway, looking increasingly nervous. Marcus could tell she wanted this charade to be over, but she was trapped in it now. Marcus, Sarah said, maybe we should let Rebecca get settled in her room. She's had a long day of traveling. Of course, Marcus agreed. But first, I have a question for both of you. Both women looked at him expectantly. Rebecca, what year did you and Sarah graduate from high school? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Rebecca looked at Sarah, clearly hoping for some kind of signal about what the right answer should be. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. We graduated different years, Rebecca finally said. I was older. How much older? A few years. Marcus nodded slowly. That's interesting, because according to the background check I ran on you this afternoon, Rebecca Bennett doesn't exist. There is no record of Sarah having a sister, and there is no record of anyone named Rebecca Bennett who matches your description or background. The room went completely silent. Rebecca's fake smile disappeared entirely, and her hand moved toward her purse. Sarah looked like she was going to be sick. I don't know what you're talking about, Rebecca said, but her voice had lost all pretense of warmth or family affection. I think you do, Marcus replied calmly. I think you're a con artist who convinced Sarah to help you get close to my money. The question is whether Sarah was a willing participant or if you threatened her somehow. Sarah started to cry. Marcus, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen. Shut up, Sarah, Rebecca snapped, and Marcus saw her hand move inside her purse. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Marcus said quietly. The police are already here. As if on cue, there was a knock at the front door, followed by a voice calling, Police! Open up. Rebecca's face twisted with rage, and she pulled a gun from her purse. You son of a bitch. You ruined everything. Marcus raised his hand slowly. Rebecca, or whatever your real name is, you don't want to make this worse than it already is. It can't get any worse, she snarled. I've been planning this for 2 years. 2 years of listening to Sarah whine about her boring life and her kid. 2 years of setting this up. and you ruined it with a phone call. The police were pounding on the door now, and Marcus could hear them moving around the outside of the house, probably surrounding it. How did you get Sarah involved in this? Marcus asked, trying to keep Rebecca talking until the police could get inside. Rebecca laughed bitterly. That was the easy part. Sarah was desperate, working 3 jobs, and still couldn't pay her bills. I found her crying in a parking lot after her car got repossessed, and I offered her a way out. All she had to do was get a job working for some rich guy, get him to fall in love with her, and then let me know when I could come collect. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was sobbing quietly. Is that true? Sarah nodded miserably. I was so scared, Marcus. I didn't know how I was going to take care of Emma. When Rebecca offered me a way to make sure Emma would never have to worry about money again, I thought maybe it would be okay. But then I fell in love with you for real, and I wanted to call the whole thing off, but Rebecca said she'd hurt Emma if I didn't go through with it. Shut up, Rebecca screamed, waving the gun at Sarah. You're ruining everything. The front door burst open, and Marcus could hear police officers entering the house. Police. Everyone stay where you are. Rebecca spun toward the office door, still holding the gun. Marcus knew he had to act before she hurt someone. He lunged forward and grabbed her wrist, trying to wrestle the gun away from her. The gun went off, the sound deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. The bullet went into the ceiling, and plaster rained down on them as Marcus and Rebecca struggled for control of the weapon. Sarah screamed, and police officers burst into the office with their own weapons drawn. Drop the gun. Drop it now. Rebecca finally let go of the gun, and Marcus quickly kicked it away from her. The police officers immediately moved in to restrain her, putting her in handcuffs as she cursed and struggled. Sarah Bennett, you're also under arrest, one of the officers said, moving towards Sarah with another pair of handcuffs. Wait, Marcus said. Officer, I'd like to speak with you about Sarah's situation. I think she may have been coerced into this. The officer looked at Marcus, then at Sarah, who was still crying. We'll sort all that out at the station. Right now, everyone involved needs to come with us for questioning. As the police led Rebecca away, she turned back to Marcus with pure hatred in her eyes. This isn't over. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Marcus ignored her threats and turned to Sarah. Sarah, I need you to tell me the truth. All of it. Starting with how you really met Rebecca and ending with what you were planning to do today. Sarah wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. Her real name is Rebecca Martinez, and she's a professional con artist. She targets wealthy men, usually through women who work for them or around them. She found me when I was at my lowest point, when I thought I might lose Emma to social services because I couldn't provide for her properly. Go on. She said all I had to do was get a job with a wealthy man, make him fall in love with me, and then give her access to his house and information about his security systems. She promised me $1 million if I went through with it, enough money to disappear with Emma and start a new life somewhere safe. Marcus felt sick hearing this, but he needed to know everything. What changed? You changed everything, Sarah said, looking at him with tears streaming down her face. I expected you to be like the men Rebecca had described, arrogant and selfish and easy to manipulate. But you were kind to me, and you were wonderful to Emma, and I fell in love with you for real. I tried to call off the plan, but Rebecca said she'd hurt Emma if I didn't go through with it. One of the police officers approached them. Mr. Blackwood, we need to take Ms. Bennett in for questioning, but given what we've heard here, it's possible she'll be charged as a victim of coercion rather than as a co-conspirator. A lot will depend on her cooperation with our investigation. Marcus nodded. Officer, there's a child upstairs, Emma, who is Sarah's daughter. She's 8 years old, and she's going to need someone to take care of her while this gets sorted out. We'll contact Child Services, the officer replied. No, Marcus said firmly. I want to take care of her. I've been her father figure for 3 years, and she shouldn't have to go to strangers during this crisis. The officer looked uncertain. Sir, given the circumstances, I'm not sure that's advisable. Officer, that little girl has done nothing wrong, and she's already been through enough trauma today. I love her like she's my own daughter, and I'm not going to let her be shuttled off to foster care when she has someone who wants to take care of her. Sarah looked at Marcus with surprise and gratitude. You do that? Even after everything I've done? Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Sarah, what you did was wrong, and I don't know if I can ever trust you again. But Emma is innocent in all of this, and I'm not going to punish her for your mistakes. The officer made some notes and said he would need to make some phone calls to figure out the custody situation. In the meantime, Marcus was allowed to go upstairs and check on Emma. He found her still locked in her room, sitting on her bed and looking scared but trying to be brave. When she saw him, she ran to him and hugged him tightly. "I heard a loud noise," she said. "Was that a gun?" Marcus held her close. "Yes, sweetheart, but everyone is okay now. The police are here, and the bad people are going away." "Is Mommy going away too?" Marcus sat down on her bed and pulled Emma onto his lap. "Emma, your mommy made some very bad choices, and she's going to have to go with the police for a while so they can figure out what's going to happen to her." Emma was quiet for a moment, processing this information. "What's going to happen to me?" "I'm going to take care of you," Marcus said without hesitation. "If you want me to, I'm going to make sure you stay here with me where you're safe and loved." Emma looked up at him with her serious brown eyes. "Even though Mommy lied to you?" "Emma, what your mother did has nothing to do with how I feel about you. I love you, and that's never going to change, no matter what happens with your mother." Emma hugged him tightly again. "I love you too, Marcus. I was scared you were going to send me away." "Never," Marcus promised. "You're my family, Emma, and family takes care of each other." They sat together quietly until one of the police officers came upstairs to let them know that the immediate crisis was over. Rebecca Martinez was being taken to jail, where she would be charged with attempted robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and conspiracy. Sarah was also being taken in for questioning, but the district attorney would decide later whether to charge her as a co-conspirator or as a victim of coercion. Over the next several hours, Marcus spoke with police officers, social workers, and lawyers to arrange for Emma's care. Because he had been acting as her father figure for years, and because Emma clearly wanted to stay with him, the authorities agreed to let her remain in his custody pending a formal hearing. That evening, after all the officials had left and the house was quiet again, Marcus and Emma sat together in the living room. Emma was curled up next to him on the couch, and they were both trying to process everything that had happened. "Marcus," Emma said quietly, "do you think Mommy really loves me?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "I think your mother loves you very much, Emma. I think she made some very bad choices because she was scared and desperate, but I don't think that changes how much she loves you. Will I be able to see her again? I don't know, sweetheart. That will depend on what the police and the courts decide. But no matter what happens, I want you to remember that none of this is your fault, and you are loved and wanted and safe." Emma nodded and snuggled closer to him. "I'm glad I told you that lady wasn't really Mommy's sister." Marcus smiled and kissed the top of her head. "You were very brave and very smart today, Emma. I'm proud of you." As they sat together in the quiet house, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed in just one day. This morning he had been planning to marry Sarah and officially adopt Emma, creating the family he had never thought he wanted. Now he was facing the reality that the woman he loved had betrayed him, but he was also more certain than ever that Emma belonged in his life. The next few weeks were difficult as the legal process unfolded. Rebecca Martinez was charged with multiple felonies and eventually pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to Marcus for the emotional distress and security costs related to her scheme. Sarah's case was more complicated. The district attorney ultimately decided to charge her with conspiracy, but her lawyer was able to negotiate a plea deal that took into account the coercion she had faced and her cooperation with the investigation. She was sentenced to 2 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 1 year. During this time, Marcus went through the legal process of officially adopting Emma. Sarah, facing the reality of her situation, agreed to sign over her parental rights to Marcus, believing it was in Emma's best interest to have stability and security with someone who truly loved her. The adoption hearing was both heartbreaking and joyful. Emma, now 9 years old, stood before the judge and clearly stated that she wanted Marcus to be her legal father. When the judge finalized the adoption, Emma hugged Marcus tightly and whispered, "Now we're really family." Marcus hired the best lawyers he could find to handle Sarah's case, not because he had forgiven her betrayal, but because he wanted Emma to have the possibility of a relationship with her mother in the future if that's what Emma wanted. He also made sure that Sarah would have support and resources when she was released from prison, again thinking of Emma's long-term well-being. Emma adjusted to her new life with remarkable resilience. She continued to do well in school, made friends easily, and seemed to thrive in the stable, loving environment that Marcus provided. She occasionally asked about her mother and expressed hope that someday they could have a relationship again. But she also made it clear that she was happy and felt secure in her life with Marcus. Marcus found that being Emma's father gave his life a meaning and purpose that all his business success had never provided. He scaled back some of his work commitments to spend more time with Emma, and he discovered that watching her grow and learn was more rewarding than any deal he had ever closed. One evening, about 6 months after the adoption was finalized, Marcus and Emma were working on her homework together when she looked up at him with a serious expression. "Marcus, I have a question. What is it, sweetheart? Do you think Mommy really planned to steal from you from the very beginning? Or do you think she really fell in love with you?" Marcus set down his pen and considered his answer. This was a question he had wrestled with himself many times over the past months. "I think it probably started as a plan to steal from me," he said honestly. "But I also think that somewhere along the way, your mother's feelings became real. People are complicated, Emma. Sometimes they can do bad things and still have good feelings at the same time." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I think she really loved you. And I think she really loves me too. But I think she was scared and made bad choices." Marcus was constantly amazed by Emma's emotional intelligence and her ability to understand complex situations. "I think you're probably right about that. Do you still love her?" This was the hardest question of all, and Marcus took a long time to answer. "I love the person I thought she was. I'm still hurt and angry about the lies and the betrayal. But I also understand that she was in a very difficult situation, and I hope that someday she can make better choices and have a good life." Emma smiled at him. "You're a good person, Marcus. That's why I'm glad you're my dad now." Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears. "I'm glad too, Emma. I'm glad too." As Emma grew older, she and Marcus developed an even stronger bond. She excelled in school and showed an early aptitude for business, often helping Marcus with simple tasks in his office and asking thoughtful questions about his work. Marcus made sure she understood the value of money and hard work, but he also taught her about generosity and using wealth responsibly. When Emma turned 12, she asked if she could write a letter to her mother in prison. Marcus helped her compose a letter that expressed her love, but also her understanding of why Sarah's choices had been wrong. Sarah wrote back, expressing her regret and her pride in the young woman Emma was becoming. They began corresponding regularly, and Marcus could see that these letters brought Emma comfort and closure. Marcus never remarried, though he dated occasionally. He found that his relationship with Emma was so fulfilling that he didn't feel the need for another romantic relationship to complete his life. Emma was his family, and she was enough. When Sarah was released from prison after serving 18 months, Marcus arranged for her to have a job at one of his companies in another city. It was entry-level work, but it was honest employment that would allow her to rebuild her life. He also made sure she had access to counseling and support services to help her stay on the right path. Emma, now 13, asked if she could see her mother, and Marcus arranged for them to meet in a neutral location with a counselor present. The reunion was emotional but positive, and they began having supervised visits once a month. Marcus could see that Emma benefited from having a relationship with her mother, even though Sarah would never again be her primary caregiver. On Emma's 16th birthday, Marcus threw her a party that was attended by her friends from school, some of his business associates who had watched her grow up, and Sarah, who had been doing well in her new life and had earned the right to attend her daughter's milestone birthday. During the party, Emma gave a speech thanking everyone for being part of her life. She talked about how grateful she was for the love and support she had received, and how she had learned that family wasn't just about blood relations, but about the people who chose to love and care for each other. "I want to thank my dad, Marcus," she said, looking at him with tears in her eyes, "for showing me what unconditional love looks like. He didn't have to take care of me when my world fell apart, but he chose to, and that choice changed my life forever." Marcus felt overwhelmed with pride and love as he listened to this remarkable young woman who had grown from a scared 8-year-old into a confident, compassionate teenager. Later that evening, after the party guests had gone home and Sarah had returned to her hotel, Marcus and Emma sat together on the porch of their house, looking out at the grounds that had been Emma's home for most of her life. "Dad," Emma said, using the title that had become natural for both of them, "I want you to know that I understand now why everything happened the way it did." "What do you mean?" "I mean, If Mom hadn't made those bad choices, if Rebecca hadn't tried to steal from you, we might never have become a real family. Sometimes bad things happen for reasons we don't understand at the time, but they lead to good things we never could have imagined. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. You're very wise for 16, you know that? Emma laughed. I had a good teacher. As they sat together in comfortable silence, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 8 years ago, a little girl had looked at a stranger and instinctively known that something was wrong. Her simple observation, "That's not Mommy's sister," had unraveled a criminal conspiracy and ultimately led to the creation of a family built on genuine love and trust. Emma had been right that day, and her courage in speaking up had saved them both from a much worse fate. Now, as Marcus looked at the confident, intelligent young woman beside him, he knew that whatever challenges the future might bring, they would face them together as a real family, bound not by deception or desperation, but by the strongest force of all, unconditional love. The little girl who had once alerted him to danger had grown into a young woman who would always be his greatest treasure, and Marcus knew that no amount of money or business success could ever compare to the gift of being her father. In the end, Rebecca Martinez's attempt to steal his wealth had failed, but it had given him something far more valuable than anything she could have taken, a daughter who had chosen him just as surely as he had chosen her.